2, 1. Did I time that right? Okay. Thank you. Is this one of those like quick videos where I need to like jump through everything? Anyway, that was a nice little introduction there. My name's Alex, and welcome to Creating Positive Update Experiences using Jamf and Nudge, my overly worded title for this presentation. So just a quick little about me. I've been a Mac admin for 10 years. This is now my second time presenting for Mac admin, so thanks for having me again. You must have liked something about me. And it's just really good to kind of be in person, seeing all your lovely faces, and I think this is being streamed, so love to see all your lovely faces as well over there. And just thank you for being here and showing your support. I am going to assume a couple of things here before we get started. I'm going to assume a little bit of basic Jamf Pro knowledge. Although this is a Jamf heavy presentation, I do think that this still applies to a lot of people using Nudge outside of Jamf. But you should also know a little bit about scripting. Honestly, most of the scripting can be copied over. There's not really too much being changed here, but you can over-configure this as much as you want. Nudge is a very complicated tool, but truthfully, you really don't need much to get started, and I do see a lot of people get tripped up on the basics. So we'll try to keep this as lean as possible, but I just want to give you a good Nudge recipe, so to speak. So there are a couple of things that we will need to have a good Nudge, and starting off with that would be the configurations, and I think that's kind of where people get a little nervous about Nudge at first. We have the suite, Nudge suite is what I use. So that includes the launch agent and Nudge itself. I'll go into it about the launch agent, but honestly, not going to be too much configuration there. An assets package. Basically what that is, that'll be any images that you want to include, any customizations that you want to include with Nudge. We'll get into that as well. Scoping, so who do I nudge and how do I nudge? An update plan, so a little bit of that scoping, but also just like a strategy on like how we're going to do that. Communications, so the thing that usually gets left out, I find sometimes with updating is, you'll get like a generic email, but we'll go into how we can add to that. And then patience, because Nudge requires patience on both sides of the project. So we're gonna start going on up, setting things up. Yes, there's an init plane. Why is it there? We don't know. It's just there. See, the people that laughed, I knew were paying attention. So everyone else, hopefully you're waking up now. This is basically the general like Nudge prompt that you'll see. Like if you don't configure Nudge and you're using it, there's like a basic mode that has even less than this. But I find that this actually is pretty good. You can actually start here and use this to nudge people. But I do like to change things up a little bit, and I'm actually going to take you kind of step by step through the configuration process and how we kind of get to this and why we're doing this, because I do like to give a reason to why we're doing this and not just say do it this way because it's the best way. Okay, you can kind of read that text. I had a feeling that you probably weren't going to be able to read that text, but I will have these slides, all the information, and also I will have in Slack, I'll probably give out some resources as well, because I've kind of figured that you're probably not going to be able to see all this. So this is essentially the custom JSON schema for Jamf that not everyone I know understands the JSON custom schema. There's actually a whole bunch of good videos on that, so I'm not going to go too in depth, about how that works. But just note that in Jamf, when you're doing configuration profile, that you can easily add within the external application section. You can actually paste in the custom schema, and basically what you're going to use is the Nudge's preference domain, so to speak. And when you paste it in there, this is one of the gotchas about custom schemas that I notice sometimes, is you'll paste it in here, and you will see that your save button is still grayed out. And you'll be like, well, is there something wrong with it? If you just click in the white space, it will allow you to save. Ask me why I even bring this up. It might have been a problem for me at one point. And I'm only breaking the rules to make sure I can see if you can even see this. So when you paste in the custom schema, it kind of is like a GUI for, instead of doing like a plist directly, it gives you like a little GUI interface to kind of configure things. So it honestly really helps a lot. And it actually gives the descriptions of, the different settings that you're configuring right in there, so that like as you're setting it up, you're like, oh, okay, I kind of know what this does, or I definitely know what this does. So we're going to go through each of these sections and configure our nudge to work. Excuse me. So starting off, we have optional features, which I kind of funny because I actually find these are some really, really useful features within there, and there's a bunch of information on here, but we're going to just highlight the first three. So the first two, I really like to use them because back in the day, I did a user experience design course, and now I'm like the expert of user experience design. I watched a whole bunch of YouTube videos. I know everything there is. I can see a Norman door from a mile away. So I'm really big on that, and like the whole like how can we kind of balance out the experiences for user benefit and for our own admin benefit. So these first two ones are kind of in that wheelhouse. So the first one is camera. So if you set this to true, nudge will not pop up if it detects that the camera's in use. And then the second one is screen sharing. So if it detects that the screen is being shared, it won't pop up. I've heard conflicting stories about some people still getting nudged. So, use and test thoroughly in your environment. But, sometimes people might not remember exactly what they were doing, or, might kind of fib a little bit. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind with that. And the attempting to block. So this is kind of the flip side of the coin. So I talked about caring about what happens for the users, but we also have to kind of think about ourselves. So I find that this setting is actually extremely useful. So in my environment, we use Google Chrome, Google products. So Google Chrome, you have to do a lot of things through there to access the important systems. And for you might have a different app that you use, but you can actually tell Nudge to close out that app. So this part only happens when we get into what they call aggressive mode. So essentially how Nudge works is it kind of has like the beginning stages where it kind of just pops up every 30 minutes as the launch agent. You can adjust it. I tell you not to do that. But so it starts prompting every 30 minutes, and you actually have a couple of different options that we're going to set up going through, so I'm not going to go into it right now. But once it gets to the aggressive mode, which most people know Nudge for, that's when you'll see that application get closed out, and it'll let the person know, hey, this application closed out because you need to update. So this is the other side of the coin where this is kind of for us, this isn't for them. But another thing that I really liked about user experience design was a big part of it was having insight into the system. So giving the user, hey, what's happening in this system? What's going on here? Because what I like about this little prompt is it tells you exactly what's going on. Hey, this application closed, and it's because you didn't update. The person might not see it the first time, but I guarantee you, if you tell them, they'll look for it in the future. So, this is kind of a good experience for everyone because it's letting them know why, and they're not just sitting there like, hey, my applications keep closing. Nudge is stupid. So I do guarantee that someone will still say that Nudge is stupid because they'll be very upset about being nudged in the first place. So for this session, we're going to turn on minor updates for this one. I'm not going to go over how to do major updates in this one, but it's pretty similar. If you want to see the differences, or the tweak settings, just let me know in Slack, and I'll gladly, like, it's like a screenshot or two, just a slight different, and your environment will, you might have some restrictions in place that might change that, but for this thing that we're setting up here, we're assuming that we're doing a minor update. Next up is the OS version requirements. And for this one, the about URL, I have it configured. I give people access to the general Apple info page. I find that that's the, if most of the time people aren't really clicking that URL. So, but if you have like an internal thing that you want to send people to, it's a URL. You can just drop whatever you want in there. Now we're getting to the fun stuff. This is one of the ones that I feel trips people up. So this is the required installation date. And what's interesting about this is the format of the date and time. Double, triple check this when you are deploying Nudge. Ask me how I know. We have time. The important thing about Nudge and the updating, make sure that you update the date the next time that you're using it. If you use the same date, they will immediately get that closed Chrome experience that I was talking about earlier. So yeah, this is one I highlight it, and I highlight it for a reason, because this one has tripped me up in the past, and I do see people like ask about it. You see that there's a Z there. That Z means Zulu time. That's a Zulu time zone. So if you go into Google and you type in Zulu to, in my case, EST, you will get the actual time that you would want to put in there, because first is the date part, and then obviously the last part is the time part. For me, it's not really super important, so I have a time in there, but this actually really is 3 a.m., so I'm assuming that no one is actually, or hoping no one's actually working at the time, so I don't want the cutoff to happen at the same time. So just keep that in mind when it comes to the date. Now, in my screenshot, I did not have this showing, because I was showing a person that was getting the aggressive nudge, but when it's not kicking off aggressive nudge, I have it set to allow user deferrals. So if you don't turn on allowing user deferrals, it's just gonna nudge, and they're gonna have to update right away. Like, it's just gonna, they're not gonna be able to defer at that moment. Allowed deferrals. I'm gonna go into a little bit later about how the allowed deferrals work. I find it, I have to tweak it. So I have to go in and I have to find out, what do I see people nudging? And if I see people taking too long, how many times have they deferred? With this strategy, I say go with the default, which is higher than this number, and then work your way down and see, like, in future deployments, how many times that people nudge, because you don't want to go too low with the deferrals. You don't want to go too high either, because then people will just defer right into the aggressive mode, and I don't want them to have to get into aggressive mode. I want them to do it before it's a problem. So approaching time window. So this basically just tells Nudge when to start preparing for getting closer to the aggressive experience. So there's the approaching window, and then there's the imminent window. There's actually a really good image on the different windows. I don't have time to cover all the different windows here, but I honestly, the Nudge wiki is really awesome. So when it comes to these specific things, like, I would look into it, but just note that as you go through each one of these, it removes like the defer to later, defer to a different date or time. So just keep that in mind, that you could use the defaults. I've tweaked the first one. It's usually, I think, 72 or 70 something hours, but the imminent is 24. And random delay, just because I don't want people to get smart and then notice, like, hey, this happens at the same time. Random delay basically takes a nudge. Like I said, it happens every 30 minutes. That's their default lodge agent. You might need to do something different, but I would say if you can, stick to the defaults, where you can, because it will save you a lot of headache. Random delay just adds a little bit of delay between that, like the 30 minutes that nudge goes off. Next up, I made mine a little bit pretty. I put in the company logo that we have, and here this is just paths, so direct paths on the device to where the assets are stored. In my case, I'm dropping them where the Jamf library files are. You can choose different areas. Just watch out where you drop those files, because sometimes macOS gets a little bit angry about where you put those things, and it won't actually read it. If your nudge prompt is showing up and your icon is wrong, it could be that. So just watch where you drop your files. Next up is the deferral count. So I do want to that insight into the system thing that I talked about and got all excited about. I want to show people how many deferrals they've made and how many they have left. So going back to this guy, you'll know now more about what we're actually looking at here. Let me see if this thing works. Does this work? Will it work? Okay, cool. Okay. Awesome. So you'll see here that we understand that this is the version that they need to update to. Days remaining, that's they've lapsed on the minimum time window. Deferred count, so that is how many deferrals they've chewed up through, so to speak. And then these are some of the text that we're going to go into. How do we update these things? The button and the important notes. So just to kind of see where we've been, where we are. Another important one to remember, especially since we're customizing our nudge, language. You see how it has a little underscore next to it to put it up to the top? I think someone put it in there because it's important. You want to set that. Ask me how I know. Yes, make sure that you have your language set. I believe in the documentation they tell you how you can see the different languages that they have available to you. EN for English here. Next up is the button. I've customized the button because I found that a lot of people came up to me and they were just kind of confused. They were confused about nudge in general, but then they were also just generally confused about, like, I clicked the button and my update didn't happen. So I've tweaked this to say open system update to tell them, hey, this is an opening system update that to them should signal I'm not done with the process yet and I need to do more. So, but again, your mileage may vary. You can change the text all you want. The main content text, that is what we saw earlier on our friend. Let me go back here. The main content, a fully up-to-date Mac is required. Again, you can tweak this. You can even nudge allow to add the screenshot in there as well. I like to keep it really, really simple. So I don't put a screenshot in there. So next up is that subheader is just a friendly reminder. So, you can change that to, I like to make my things really personable, if you hadn't noticed. Like I really like to help people be happy with that. Like, so again, remember the English settings and the action button settings. So next up, we have the packaging and the scripts. Ironically, really not that bad. For the package, all I have is just a logo asset, and as I told you, I dropped that into the Jamf library section, but again, you can make your own folder within the library. You can drop it anywhere that you want. I use this same logo for other applications that or tools that I put out, so you can kind of reuse, reduce, recycle in that regard. And then for scripting, we just have the nudge install script. And then I actually have a nudge removal script that I use because sometimes you have to take nudge off. Sometimes people were not ready. And sometimes that person was actually meeting with the client or might have been like a C-level person. I'm not going to say it, but ask me how I know. So this is the script here. Again, you don't have to stress too much about having it. I just wanted to show it. But you might have your other tool that you use, and I'm not saying not to use it. You might have your own packaging system that you have or whatnot. But I like to just script my download, script my removal, and it's like nudge was never there. They never know that's coming. And then nudge removal script. These just get dropped into the policies that we all have. So really, it's just the package for the company logo and then the install script for nudge. In my case, I have nudge install during my deployment. And I'll let it sit there just in case I have to redeploy it. But honestly, most of the times I'm redeploying it. Nudge is really cool, like chill about like being overwritten. So for each of your deployments, you can just have nudge install each time, and better to be safe than sorry, because you do want to make sure that you kind of check on the nudge releases and just to make sure nothing has changed over time. Although thankfully it's not so frequent that it's too much. So this is kind of like an added bonus thing that I actually, full disclosure, just added in recently because I'm like, oh, actually, you might enjoy this part. So when it comes to nudge itself, there is a log that's on the machine, which is really great when you have the machine in front of you. But in this day and age, you probably don't have the machine in front of you. And I mentioned earlier about user deferral. It's like, well, how do I know how many times people deferred? Well, the nice thing is you can actually add it as an extension attribute in Jamf. Again, going back to the assuming some knowledge here, I'm going to assume that you know how to add an extension attribute. It's actually super, super easy. In our case, they're just scripts. Again, I'm going to skip through them, but do note that they're in the slides for your viewing pleasure, so to speak. And then we have nudge log, which actually will pull a chunk of the nudge log and have that in the extension attribute. So when you look at the each individual device or an export or report, you can actually have all the information there. And then it kind of looks like this. So up top, let's see, will my super special thing work again? Cool. So nudge deferral status 5. So this is actually one of my old devices. So here I actually nudged 5, or I deferred nudge. So the nudge window popped up. I said, I don't feel like doing it right now. I'm going to move it to later. So I did that 5 times, so well within the allotted time that I set aside. And then here in the nudge log, this is not really, I would say, like a deployment thing. This is more like a troubleshooting thing. It's nice to have this information here. So if I see, hey, why do I have a bunch of people that didn't get updated? Sometimes you'll find that, hey, I was missing something, or nudge might have not deployed properly on that device, or it's not seeing things and it needs to get taken off and re-added, which the nudge removal and add script, you can have a policy to kind of reinstall nudge, so to speak. So with that being said, we can now go into planning and scoping. Here's the Hubble. Why is it there? It just is. All right, cool. All right, cool. People are waking up again. All right, cool. All right, now for the boring stuff. This is where I get on my little soapbox and start talking about like the soft skills kind of thing of it. Because like I said, there's kind of the technical side of things. I showed you where the gotchas are. You could deploy that and be done with it, and it gets fine. So when it comes to having a strategy for updating, everyone has their own way of doing it. And I'm not saying that my way is the best way. So my advice, though, if you're like, hey, I'm not really excited or jazzed about my updating, break it down. So break it down into either you have departments, you have groups that don't like being updated, groups that like being updated. Find a way to not do it all at once. By all means, you can do it all at once. But what's kind of nice about breaking it up is if you break it up, you have opportunities to reach out to people directly in that group. You have opportunities to get a group that maybe tested the update for you, and maybe the update broke something. But you probably have like a beta process and testing on your own beforehand. But nothing will ever beat the real world testing. So you could have just like a nice little test group, and then deploy it out based on whatever breakdown that you try to do. Keep the tech savvy people up front, and also the people that communicate a lot. I say that knowing that sometimes you don't want that person reaching out to you like, hey, this update's bothering me, oh, this is wrong. But that person might be the one that actually is the canary in the coal mine for you. but they are different than someone who's like the risk-averse person, like someone that has a sensitive, job and can't have downtime and stuff like that. It's very different than that. So definitely, when you can, try to find ways of breaking that up in a logical way that will help you out. So it helps them out, helps you out. Some people really like updating early. And of course, I think most people probably do this part. Just generally sending out an email, making sure, hey, 13.5 is out. It's all that update right now. Do it right now. It's security. You can do that, or you can find other ways of announcing. And again, I feel like if we're here, most of the people will probably have different ways as well, like Slack or chat method, whatever like resonates with your user base the most. I would say go with that, and keep the process consistent so that people know. Like, one of the things that I was very surprised about over time with Nudge was like, oh, next time around, like each time I had less and less people kind of complaining about it, or hey, the first time I did it, I got so many emails saying, hey, I'm getting hacked. Like, someone's saying no, tell me the update. And I'm like, no, that's us. Like, yeah. Even though I sent an email, I sent a chat. I even sat in a big meeting room with everyone and said, hey, this is a thing that we're doing. But what I found is they probably won't listen. But over time, though, they will learn. Like, most people will learn. So going back to, or this is more so a continuation of my philosophy in updating and nudging and why I like it and whatnot is, again, I don't know if it's a term, but I just say user-centric updating, because I feel like updating itself has kind of started going in that realm. A lot of tools I see cropping up are trying to make updating easier and better for people and giving them more awareness. But outside of that, like outside of the tools itself, it's really up to us to educate and help people understand, why they're updating, who we are. A lot of times we kind of do end up in the wayside, and like, yes, we send out emails, and I'm sure a bunch of us here do talk with, your user base or whatnot, but definitely like finding ways, if you can, presenting at meetings, even if it's like little stuff like security updates, or just talking about the updates, or like why we're doing this, like why do I need to update my Mac, stuff like that. I recommend it because I find the more I get in front of people and the more I talk to them, or the more that they just get general communication, even if it's just more consistent, people react better to the nudging or whatnot. And you might not want to deal with people or talk to people. There might be someone on your team, if you have one, or someone that you can kind of proxy through that can also just kind of help bridge that gap. You just need buy-in to help the update process go smoothly. And also listen to people. Like, a lot of times they might have silly little arguments about like, well, every time I update, my Mac gets destroyed and it just spontaneously combusts into a ball of fire. Well, I'm sorry, Jimmy, I didn't know that happened every time. Let's see what we can do to prevent that from happening in the future. Because a lot of times people just want to be heard. And and if you have a rapport with them and you can joke with them, I find that it really just takes that edge off versus dealing with maybe like a high level person that you haven't really talked to and just very, very bitter about their machine just randomly rebooting on them and having a screen that wouldn't let them do any of their work, even though you told them ahead of time about updating. So going into the deployment stuff, I find that Jamf Smart Groups is really good as far as like my scoping process. So I actually break up my user base and to actually go into what that user base is, because I know I have it blurred out here, but basically we have our IT team as like the first group of people because we're always in the front lines. I have my organizational people that it's basically all the people I pushed into the back. I'm like, all right, these are the people that should be kind of to the end of the line. I have like my tech savvy people like in a group as well. And then at where my environment that I'm in, we have a call center that is very sensitive to updates. They kind of get their own little group here. So I have them broken out into 4 groups. When I start these numbers, I promise you are much higher. And now they've gotten so much lower. Thank you. And then that's just an example of what my smart group is looking for. My smart group is just looking for the version of the OS that I'm targeting, which is the latest one that we have right now, unless Apple drops one randomly. The machines that are deployed, and then the department. So mine is a department-based scoping, but again, yours could be different. So I showed earlier what we have in the policies. In general, it's just an install policy, a removal policy. The removal is as needed, so depending on the situation that materializes, do I need to remove nudge from everyone? I might just scope that to a different group or an individual, depending on the situation. I kind of clear that out over time. Both of these I have happen once per computer, so for each deployment, I'm clearing out the logs so I can actually just reuse these policies. You could have your own different way that you actually want to do it. So you can change it up and go, no, I want to have different nudge installs, like in different policies for that. And then for the removal, I want to have it at a different time. Like, go wild on that end, how you want to. I'm keeping it very simple here. And as I showed earlier, reoccurring check-in. I also do have it as a custom trigger, just in case sometimes you're with the device and you want to trigger it right away. So with that, you've been nudged. Is everyone up to date here?
You're talking about our devices?
Yeah, like you're right here. Because I heard that they really want you, because they have fast internet here, they really, really want you to use all the bandwidth that they have available. So, moving on to any questions.
Apple RSR updates.
There's always one. I was preparing for you.
No, I apologize.
I've been waiting on that. Oh, yes. Well, I'll repeat your question for that. So the question was, I knew that was going to happen at some point. All right. So the question was, RSRs. Are RSRs supported right now in Nudge? No, I am very sorry. And it does not seem to there'll be anytime soon for that to happen. I do see people out there, and I highly recommend there's the Nudge channel, and then there's Nudge Jamf, and then the wiki and whatnot. I recommend checking in there, because that's honestly where that conversation has been the most active. And right now, it's even Jamf itself. I've had difficulty. Apple doesn't even allow us to force the install itself. All I can do is prevent RSRs or let people install them and let them remove them as well. You can configure that. Yeah, I don't anticipate anytime soon that they're going to add RSRs. And honestly, my hot take of the day is I don't really know if at the RSR in its state right now, I don't even know if I want to fully deploy the next one. I'm sure someone angry comment in the other room that I can't see right now. I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm sorry to say, but if it does happen, you'll see it in the Nudge channel or Nudge Jamf. And also I know that Eric, and thanks Eric for Nudge, if he happens to ever watch this. I really appreciate his work, but I know that he needs some, or if someone wants to implement it, I don't know if you can contribute, but if anyone can contribute to RSR, it's in Nudge. That would be delightful. Next question. All right, I'm gonna try to do this. Oh,
nice throw.
It's good.
So do you have nudge running at all times? I know the log keeps growing and growing and growing. So do you have nudge running all the time, or do you have smart groups that kind of remove the configuration profile when you don't want it updated? 'Cause
Yeah,
you
so
do have
actually
the smart
that is a
groups.
really good question, because I should have explained that. So when it comes to the smart groups themselves, when the Mac gets fully up to date and it's recognized as being accepted, because I'm using a smart group, it actually will, the configuration profile is assigned to that smart group. So it removes the smart group, and then nudge just stays in a dormant state after that. The log thing is a good question. It is something that I should warn you about. Like, by pulling out the last section of the logs and putting it into the object for the computer, your Jamf instance, Jamf might not get happy with all the information in there. So for the, not for the deferral status, but for the nudge log, just be aware of that, because I don't want to tell people to go do that and then their Jamf instance starts choking. But so far, I haven't seen any impact in my Jamf environment, but your mileage may vary on that one. You want to?
It's way later now.
My back. All right. Questions?
I've had a few cases where folks were getting nudged. They go in and tried to run the update. The update failed for whatever reason, and this continued until it went, past the aggressive threshold, and suddenly they couldn't do anything with their machine because the updates repeatedly failed. Is there any way to catch that before it gets to that point?
So for that one, Mac OS updates are fun.
Aren't they?
They're really fun right now, and I have a feeling that Apple knows that they're fun right now. And I actually had this exact experience where people wouldn't see the update at all, and they were still getting repeatedly nudged. So in those cases, I happen to know the solution was to tell them to restart their Mac. So honestly, that goes into like having a communication channel with your users. So when it comes to someone having like an actual issue with nudge, and the update or an update failing, sadly, those are just, they're going to be edge cases that you'll have to, there's no real way that I can think of off the top of my head that nudge could like warn me about it. But yeah, your mileage will vary on that based on the situation. Like I've been fortunate that I've not hit into like a completely like oblivion situation of, oh no, nothing, like nudge is nudging and nothing is working. That is why I have that escape hatch of the nudge removal, because at some point I'm like, all right, I just need to like just pull all of it, because the configuration can stay there, like that's fine, but just removing the app, and that unloads the launch agent and everything in real time. So but most of the time, if someone's like stuck at that screen, I usually just tell them like, okay, restart your computer, and then they'll have enough time for when the computer restarts to actually get into the environment, and then nudge will get removed at the same time, versus them having to stare at the window and wait for that check-in to happen and everything to actually kick off. More questions? Oh, that's scary every time. They don't.
That was a testament to your throwing.
No questions back there, please.
So you had a slide up there earlier about the timestamp and the deadline for nudge.
Yes.
In Zulu time.
Yes, my favorite time zone, actually.
And I wanted to share something. It was a fairly recent discovery about that timestamp. If you remove the Z, it becomes the local time for that user's machine rather than universal coordinated time. So if you have a worldwide deployment of Macs, like some clients do, and you want it to be the deadline at, like, let's say 5 p.m. wherever they are, if you leave the Z off, it will be that time for that user's local time zone.
I like that. A little nugget of wisdom. I asked for questions, though. I didn't ask for nuggets. I'm kidding.
Well, fine. Do you want the box back?
No. Yeah. I'm just gonna do. We have some time, so I'll just do stunts for the rest of it. Any other questions? Oh, you cheated. You walked over.
I'm already standing.
There.
Thanks. I love this product. No other way that I can get close to 95% compliance. Without Nudge, if I was lucky to get 70. So.
Oh, it was night and day for when Nudge first. Not exactly when it first came out, but I'd say like a couple of cycles after it first came out. Like I deployed it completely. Definitely over nudged a bunch of people, but the speed of the update was just like, I was like, wow, okay, this is something.
So, so my question is, I use the bare minimum because the JSON, they even warn you in the Slack channel and even in the environment, they're like, this can get very granular and your train can run over the cliff.
Yes.
Really quickly.
Exactly.
And I found myself doing that. And so I have it at the bare minimum. I have the time and I have the minimum OS. And that's it. And it works great, except for the major upgrades. I
Yes.
went from Monterey to Ventura,
Yeah, I did that too, actually.
and Nudge decided not to work. And so, I went in the Nudge channel, and I added a couple more things in terms of the OS, targeted OS, that sort of thing. But it just didn't want, because with the patches, it's great.
Yes.
It's never not worked. The timing, 30
yeah.
minutes, 35 minutes, it's never right there. I can never say in 30 minutes you're going to get it on the dot, but for the most part it does. But for major upgrades, were there any other configuration settings that you would recommend for a major upgrade?
So for major upgrade, it depends on like your situation. So you're describing, I actually went through. And instead of just going through I would like to add it to like maybe the Slack channel or to my resources for this conversation, because I think to pull it up would be and just say it wouldn't be enough. But I actually use the race install to download the full OS installer, because in my environment's unique in the situation, or it's not unique. Per se, I have a half non-admin and half standard, or half admin, half standard users. So that I knew right away that yes, I was gonna run into problems if I was gonna do the major OS just like as is. So I found that using erase install and pointing Nudge does have a setting where you can actually give a Jamf a self-service URL. And so I made the full OS installer available in self-service, and I had Nudge point them to self-service. And going back to that whole communication thing, highly communicated with those users and everyone actually, because I did have the option of doing, well, for standard users, I could do it that way, and then for the regular users, do it the regular way. For everyone, I did the erase install, because yes, there's some having to download the full installer, blah, 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 and whatnot. I found that it was just the easiest way of doing that. So there's a great documentation. Erase install is a channel in Slack. If you haven't heard about it before, I highly recommend it. The name says erase install, but it doesn't actually erase everything. You can choose to not do that. I'd like to clarify before someone's like, wait, I'm not going to wipe everyone's device for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Oh, this thing is very scary. Okay. You don't know what I've knocked over. Oh, and you had to drink. Look at that.
It's empty.
Yeah. Come on, I gave you the $5 to not tell them that.
So the other solution to Nudge that a lot of people are considering is Superman or Super. And I know that uses the actual MDM commands that Apple is making available to for future use. Hopefully that's going to work really well. I wonder, what's your thought on whether to use those MDM commands or to continue having the user actually go to system settings and click Obviously, one is more backwards compatible, but is that where you're going to continue going?
Let's get that out of the way. So when it comes to Super, I haven't specifically used Super, but I do know people that have. They've liked it. And the only issue is those MDM commands. Those MDM commands don't always kick off, and they're not always great. Now, there's another elephant in the room that I'll add to that, in context I'll add to that. Apple looks to be Sherlocking some of the features of Nudge in their future versions. Now, I'm hoping that those work, but until then, Nudge will happily remain in my toolbox. But for the MDM commands, they're just too unreliable for me to suggest anyone use them. I've used them because I'm like, all right, I just really want this person to update. Let me just try it. It's a coin flip if it actually works. And then the other thing that I find when it comes to using Nudge and going back to my philosophy of user-centric updating, so to speak, if any of you take that, please just give me the credit, maybe a couple of bucks, maybe a six-pack or something. But it goes back to that. Showing people how to use the inbuilt tools of how to update means that if Nudge disappeared tomorrow, I at least have the ability to tell people, hey, go into system settings, here's a screenshot, and update your Mac. And most of the time, they'll know how to do it because they've done it before. And with the way that kind of Apple runs things, I do see or feel like they're maybe coming around to the business side of things and kind of putting more tools out there and more settings in place for us to do things in the back end and control those things. It's first designed with like a personal device in mind, so making sure that people can do those things, I find that actually helps out in the long run, because I do have people come up to me and have many conversations about their experience, because I do ask them, I'm like, hey, are you like, especially if someone hasn't updated, I'll go, I work in a hybrid office environment, so I can actually walk up to people and say like, hey, like, you haven't updated, and then talk with them and, well, no, I didn't do it because like I have a meeting, and like I'm like, yeah, last time you didn't update, you also had a meeting that you did not want to miss. I'm like, if you update beforehand, that won't happen. And I think after the third time, the person was like, hey, they actually ran and found me to tell me, hey, I updated. I'm like, I know, thanks. But getting them engaged and wanting to do that and being proud of that, like I just feel like it makes the update experience a little bit more fun. And also, like, if we get the kudos for getting everyone from the security team, like being like, hey, we updated everyone, and people get a chance to interact with us in a positive way, it'll make, when I have to go to them and be like, yeah, we need to remove this access or something, or they go, oh, like this, my computer isn't working, but you know what, I can, I don't need help right now, like we can do it tomorrow. Like you'll get a little bit more leeway in that. So that was a tangent, everyone. But we can go back to questions. And I hope that answered yours. All right, let's go for this.
So if somebody sets it up, the JSON file, you drop it into library preferences manually instead of using an MDM?
So if you're using the JSON implementation versus what I showed you,
yes,
yeah, your configuration will be, for the JSON, you can also do a remote JSON, but you can also do it locally.
The question I have is, if you've went down that path and tested it out, and then you go through and set up the MDM versus like the Jamf rollout,
yeah,
does it trump the other one? Or do you have to do a complete removal to begin with and then do the MDM?
Oh, I see your question is. The question is essentially like, will those settings conflict? I want to say, and maybe someone can trump me on this, I want to say that the MDM would override it, but I actually can't specifically answer that question. So, but my guess is the MDM will override it. Always test. Oh, this is an easy one. Look at, there we go.
Is it possible to give users such experience that we utilize the standard Apple notification on the right top corner,
Yeah.
or implement some red dots? Maybe I heard from one of the attendants yesterday. Just implement that red dot, and then even before the update is installed or after the update is installed automatically, but just prompt the user to reboot their computer.
I don't think that's within the scope of nudge. To have like the little notification like that. I want to say that, yeah, you would need to like make your own system for that. I will maybe delve into my toolbox a little bit, and I use a tool called Support App. So Support App is a little widget that appears in your menu bar on your Mac that you can customize and have information. I don't want to turn this into a presentation on that tool, but if you look up Support App, they actually will, you have an option to give a little badge notification in the menu bar, and it'll put a little red dot, exactly what you were asking for, when an update is available. So I actually have some people, because I use Support App as well, and that one actually gets all my like really anal people that like are like, I don't want little red dots anywhere. And so I have people reaching out to me, why do I check for updates and I have the red dot. Why do I have the red dot? I'm like, it's because I'm blocking an update right now because there's something wrong with it. They're like, but I don't want the red dot. And there's a way to get rid of that, but neither here nor there. But that would be my recommendation if you want something like that. Because when it comes to like the update process, if the machine needs a reboot, it should prompt them for a reboot in the Apple UI for updating. Another reason why I don't necessarily love using the commands, the remote commands, because sometimes for the remote commands, you can do a install immediately, and it'll just install and reboot and not tell them what's going on. And I like to, going back to earlier, like to give people the experience of knowing what the system's doing, why their system's rebooting, because otherwise I get a ticket being like, hey, my system isn't working. You know, it just randomly shut off. I think I need a new Mac. Hello again.
So I've been living in a cave since 2015. Why can't I just use software update -IA like I used to do?
Oh, God. Man, I should have just padded out my presentation now way more. So for that one, off the top of my head, because I don't fully remember the reasoning, I feel like someone does know the reasoning. Yeah.
Apple Silicon.
Well, you're talking and you're going to talk, right?
Yep, they need your password to update. So yeah, and that's been a whole fun thing, because especially with some of the updates that were popping up and saying like, oh, enter in the admin account. And my standard users are like, I don't have an admin account. I'm like, I know, just type in your username and password. But it goes back to the communication thing. I communicated ahead of time, hey, you're going to need to enter in like this password and prompt. I made like a quick little guide, sent it out to the people that we're going to have to, or that were standard users, and we're going to need those prompts. And I'd say 50-50. People still came back, why am I getting this? You know, but again, teaching them over time, they just started doing it, because it did happen a couple times in a row. Hopefully this next update, it doesn't do that, but we'll find out what happens when it happens, right? Oh, Mac updates are fun. I love it, my repeat offenders.
Do you have a best practice of either pushing out the suite compared to pushing out the launch agent versus the app? Is there like a best practice for that, or is it just preference, or?
For me, it is. I don't think it's necessarily it's a best practice in the sense of like sticking with all the defaults, all the standard stuff, and just doing things in the suggested manner. It is like what is best practice, so to speak. But for me, it's more of like the preference of. I know a lot of people get caught up in the launch agent. I see so many conversations of like, oh, well, I need it to run on this time or that time, and like it needs to specifically happen on like a Monday or a Wednesday at this time when the moon's aligned to this. I don't like doing that because that's not how the tool was really designed, or I feel like that's not really how the tool was designed. Like it was designed with that 30-minute setup in mind. And if you choose to, you can totally customize and do it. But I find when I try to customize things, I break things. So where I don't have to customize, I try to avoid it. Just like my friend earlier was mentioning, like I have the bare, he has the bare minimum, only touches a couple of things. When it comes to the Nudge suite, it has everything I need. One package, I have that one package, I have the asset package. And like I'm good to go. I don't even actually have that. I'm scripting it, so I don't even have to worry about packaging a thing. So that saves me even more worry because I don't have to package something. So another benefit to using this suite and not customizing things, less things to break. And Apple updates are broken enough. We don't need to introduce our own breaking points. Oh, I love it.
So I'm actually looking at my own Jamf Nudge implementation as we speak here, and it looks like my JSON that I'm currently using is a little bit older than what's the latest available. Is there an easy way to copy and paste the new JSON into Jamf without losing all of the customizations?
I was thinking about that the other day when I was building this presentation, or adding to it, because I just kept adding to it. I don't think that there is an easy way of doing that. For me, what I ended up doing was internally we use a Jira and Confluence. So I have a Confluence page with all my settings, kind of tedious, but if you have your general settings and then you have like date and time are the ones that you kind of like leave with like a default, although I'd probably forget once in a while to change that default if I copy and pasted it in. But I don't, if any Jamf experts are in the room, I don't think that there's a way to export the JSON schema in that way.
It takes less time to just clone the configuration profile and then just...
Yes, and that is how, so, and you know what, I should have had that in the slide, and I apologize for missing that. When it comes to how my deployment works as far as like the nitty gritty is I clear out, like I said, the nudge installs. I have those for smart groups. For my devices, I update the version that it needs to be, that those smart groups update. They're already part of the nudge install. So if I clear out nudge install, it will install again. And then my configuration profiles, when I'm ready to, that is when I will add them to those smart groups as well. So for me, I just cloned my one configuration profile that I set up how I wanted it. I cloned it for each department, and then all I need to do is change my date and times. So my date and times sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. So I did say deploy in departments. I probably should have specified that when it comes to end dates, you might want to have them overlap. I prefer to not have them overlap, so I don't have everyone on the deadline at the same time, so to speak. Any other questions? From the back. Do I need to put up a Hubble, a plane? I don't know what wakes everyone up here. I know it's the first session of the day, and I really appreciate all of you coming here. and I hope that you've left with some more understanding. I will give you back. It says 16 minutes right now, but by the time we actually wrap up, it'll be 15 minutes. So for you to get to your next session, unless you have any questions, you're more than welcome. I'll still be here. Oh.
Just one question. Sorry if I missed this.
Yeah. But anyone who wants to go, it's right here.
That script, is that downloadable, or is that something that you created?
That was, I want to say it was downloadable. Full disclosure, I've been doing Nudge for a while now, so some of this stuff I've had in production for a hot minute and just haven't touched. The Nudge install script, I want to say that is out there. I'll make all the scripts available, though, after the presentation. I'll probably, what I'll do is I'll give if you want more information, join Nudge, the Slack group, and I'll make sure to put links to everything that I had, and then when the presentation slides come out, I'll link that in there as well, just so that everyone has it, and the community will have it right there for everyone.
Awesome, thanks so much.
Yeah. All right. Any other last minute questions? I was right, 15 minutes. You're free to go. Thank you. I don't know why I started clapping for myself, but.